Welcome to Naked Comedy with David Zucker, where we unpack the craft, structure, and secrets behind great comedy. This podcast is filmed in front of a live audience of our Master Crash members. If you'd like to participate in these conversations live, join us at mastercrash.com.
Hello and welcome back to another amazing episode of Naked Comedy with David Zucker. And today we have a very special guest. We have Tom Dreesen, who has over 500 appearances on national television as a stand-up comedian, including 61 times on The Tonight Show. He was a favorite guest of David Letterman's, even hosted the show in David's absence. He has appeared in all the main showrooms in Las Vegas, and for over 14 years, he toured the nation as the opening act for Frank Sinatra. So if you're a comedy writer, you do not want to miss this episode. It's going to be incredible. Hi, Tom. Welcome to
Thank
the
you.
show.
I'm happy to be here. This is very exciting. I didn't know David had the talent to bring such great talent around him.
Or that your life was so dull that this would be exciting.
Yes. And David and I have been friends for over 20 years. And this is what we do. We zig each other back and forth. And he makes me laugh, you know.
And this guy makes me laugh, but I can't do what he does. And there was one part, I don't know if you remember this, but I heard a joke that I thought was so great. And at the next time we were together, I started to tell him the joke. Totally blew it. It's like, this stuff is harder than it looks. And I just couldn't, I just crashed and burned. I couldn't. And then you see, he was very polite. And you said, I haven't heard that joke.
Had you heard it?
Oh, yeah. You know, almost every joke. I've been a comedian 56 years. So, and before I was a comedian, I was in the service and I was always the funny guy aboard ship and stuff. And I was a bartender when I came out of the service. So telling jokes behind the bar got you a lot of tips and stuff. So there's hardly any that I haven't heard. Or there's a formula to a lot of jokes that I may not have heard it the way, but when you're going through the joke, there's a formula and I'll know where it's going. Every now and then, though, somebody will tell me one I've never heard before, and I go, whoa, that's really good, you know.
How did you actually meet? How did you become friends?
We had a group that just got together every now and then because we had mutual endeavors. We had passions about our country and about the and where the direction of the country was going. And so we be bonded that way. It started out with about 20 guys, and then it turned into over 2,000 people.
Wow.
And
men and women.
Sinise introduced us. Yeah. And Tom and Gary. Oh, that's right. Gary Sinise Foundation. Gary Sinise is a saint. You know, he runs this foundation to help wounded veterans. I mean, he's really the Bob Hope of.
I toured with Bob Hope, but Gary is even a greater patriot. It's hard to believe that. Bob Hope would do 4 or 5 or 6 shows a year. Gary would do 40 or 50 shows a year for the troops all over the world. Wow. But what we did, we raised money. I would perform with him sometimes, and we'd raise money to build smart homes for the first responders and for men and women in the armed forces who lost their arms and their legs. Yeah. And we built close to 100 now, and it's really touching and really moving when you go there and you see these people in wheelchairs, but now they go into a home where the door automatically opens up, the bathroom facilities, the kitchen facilities. It gives them, almost all these hardened, tough combat troops break into tears, you know. Wow. That people care that much. And Gary keeps doing it. And then his last line is, we could always do a little bit more.
You know, he moved a couple of years ago, he moved to Tennessee.
Nashville.
And we had a big goodbye party for him at the Reagan Library. Were you at that? Yeah. And I hired a marching band too.
But I was at the Reagan Library with you, and the priest was talking, and talking, and he was talking about Jesus. And I said to David, you know, Jesus was a Jew. And David said, tell him that.
You were a veteran yourself.
Yes.
And you were a bartender, you said. And what was that doorway into comedy? At what point did you feel like, oh, this is...
I never dreamed, I never thought I'd ever be in show business. It was the furthest thing from my mind. When I came out of the service, I was married, I had a wife and 3 kids. I was wandering aimlessly. Every job I did, I'd get a job, and I'd get real good at the job, and I'd get bored with it. And I loaded trucks. I was a Teamster. Then I dropped my Teamster card, and I was a foreman for all these Teamsters. 48 Teamsters now work for me that I used to work with. That was really a tough assignment in Chicago. I also was a photographer. My brother was a professional photographer, so I helped him in the business. I was a bartender. Always took bartending jobs because when I also worked construction in the winter, you couldn't do a lot of construction, so I'd be a bartender. Anyhow, I'm wandering aimlessly, and this is the truth. I actually started praying. I said, God, this can't be what I'm supposed to be doing. I'd be in a bar at 2 o'clock in the morning with all my buddies, and I'd say, I don't belong here, but I didn't know where I belonged. So I started praying. I said, God, show me what I should be doing with my life. Anyhow, I joined a civic group called the JCs. In those days, the Junior Chamber of Commerce. It was young men of action, young men ages 18 to 36. If there was a problem in the community, we attacked that problem. They taught you how to form a committee, how to chair a committee, set up subcommittees. They taught you Robert's Rules of Order, how to handle meetings, which really helped me later on in show business, emceeing major events. Anyhow, we would solve the problems of the community. One of the biggest problems in the community then, as is now, and this is over 50 years ago, were our youth using drugs. So I wrote a drug education program teaching grade school children the ills of drug abuse with humor. It was a concept I had: get the kids laughing, show some funny things, and get the kids laughing and play some music. And I wanted 8th graders just before they went into high school. And the program, what happened was, as I'm talking about prayers being answered, at the night that I proposed this to the JCs, that they would sanction it as a JC project, that I wanted to go into the grade schools with the JC sanction, that after it was over with, a young black man walked up to me. He had just joined the chapter. He graduated from Norfolk State College, a historical black college, and E.I. DuPont recruited him in Chicago as a marketing rep. He came up and said, I'd like to work with you on that project. And I said, gee, I have a guy, thank you. I had a white friend named John DeBoer.
Which you really preferred, because you always preferred white people. Well, I mean, I know Tom. I've been, yeah.
Incidentally, I grew up in an all-black neighborhood. We had 8 kids. We lived in a shack. You know, black guys I played basketball with and football, they never call me like a derogatory honky or anything. They call me white boy.
Okay. Which was polite.
Very polite. They call me white boy. I have an album out in front of an all-black audience called That White Boy is Crazy. Because I'm the only white comedian ever do an album in front of an all-black audience. I tell people, I was 12 years old when I found out my name wasn't White Boy, you know. That night I said, gee, I'm sorry, I got a guy. The next day, my prayers answered. John DeBoer called me and said, Tom, I can't do that project with you. Wow. He said, I got a new job. I said, gee, what was that black guy's name? Oh, yeah, Tim Reid. I said, I got a hold of him. We rehearsed the program over and over. Went into the classrooms. The moment I hit the classroom, I realized what a godsend this was, because the children were black and white. Yeah. So we were young guys, and we dressed in that style in those days. And we got their attention immediately. And then we'd make them laugh, and then we'd plant the seeds of the ills of drug abuse. The program became #1 in 50 states and in 22 foreign countries through JC publications on how to teach drug education at an 8th grade level.
And up until that time, you had not done stand-up.
Not at all. Nothing like that at all. One day, a little 8th grade girl walking out of the classroom said, you guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team. An 8th grade girl, her name was Vicky Sarufka. We stay in touch with her to this day. Wow. The thought of a black-white comedy team intrigued us because no one had ever done that before.
And you have to remember it was that time.
1969. We became America's first black and white comedy team. History shows we were the last. There's never been one since. You got the backdrop of 1969. The Vietnam War students were protesting all over America. Race riots all over America. In my neighborhood where I grew up at, one of the largest riots in the country. Wow. The world was in turmoil. And here we were going around going to try to make people laugh. We weren't preaching. Yeah. We were just trying to make people laugh.
Was your material political at all?
We'd have been run out of town on a rail today with the politically correct police. Yeah. One of the things we did, we wrote a routine on, I was interviewing the first black president of the United States. This is how... Our books, the book we wrote a book called Tim and Tom, An American Comedy in Black and White. It should have been called Before Our Time, because everybody who read it said, you guys are before your time.
Yeah.
I was interviewing him. I was a reporter. what are you going to do when you become president of the United States? He said, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Congress to enact a law that dead people are not allowed to vote in Chicago. Big laugh, right? Because in those days, dead people were voting in Chicago. And then I said, and what's the second thing you're going to do? He said, I'm going to ask Congress to enact a law that live people aren't allowed to vote in Mississippi.
You know, that's still funny.
Yeah. I wrote a lot of those jokes, but anyhow, we became America's first black and white comedy team, and we paid dues like no other act ever had to pay. In those days, you didn't see a black guy and a white guy walking down the street together, let alone on a stage together. You know, and we paid dues. On the fourth time on stage, a guy put a lit cigarette out in Tim's face and then tried to beat the Jesus out of me. I boxed when I was in the Navy, but he outweighed me by 100 pounds. He's a big guy. And that damn near destroyed both of us, you know. And then some buddies of mine jumped over the bar, and it turned into a real brawl of Donnybrook. But there was a small percentage of Americans that did not want us to succeed on the black side and on the white side. You know, an interesting thing about racism in those days, if we appeared in front of an all-black audience, there would be a black guy or two or three in the audience that didn't want to see us get along together. You know, and the same thing if we appeared in front of an all-white audience, then it'd be a white guy didn't want to see us get along together. Because you could see we were uniting people with our, not with our dialogue, more with our jokes. In those days, everywhere you went in America, here's the irony. People would say, you know what we need in this country? Better race relations. You know what they're saying today? You know what we need in this country? Better race relations. Tim Reid and I were having a race relation America wasn't having. We were having a relationship on stage. All of our stuff wasn't political or nor was it racial, but we were having fun on stage together. I can't, and I'll end with this. I can't tell you how many times in our 6 years that we stayed together that after we'd do a show, anywhere there was racial tension, we went. We did 11 prisons in 1 year. We did the county jail in Chicago 3 times. We did high schools, colleges, wherever there was racial tension, we would go make them laugh. I can't tell you how many times a white kid would come up after and say, you know, I got a black friend that I really like. I'd like to reach out to him, but if I do, the white guys are going to call me names and stuff. But watching you guys, I'm going to reach out to my black friend. Then a black kid would come and say, you know, I got a white friend. I kind of like the guy, but the brothers are going to call me names. But after watching you and Tim, I'm going to reach out to my white friend. That happened to us more than anything else, and I'll take that to my grave.
I just got emotional just hearing that.
It was an interesting time. There's so many funny stories. We wrote a book called Tim and Tom, an American comedy in black and white. And I can't tell you how many people say, this should be a movie, this should be it. But we sat down with some writers, and the woman writer is a very good writer. She backed up after about an hour. She said, you guys, this is not a feature film. This is a miniseries. You got way too much material. And we do. We tell funny stories that happen to us, and a real funny story that we tell on interviews sometimes, and it's in our book too. We were working in Detroit. Motown was in Detroit in those days. We were sitting around writing material we were new. We didn't know anything about writing jokes when I started out. I didn't take a joke class. I knew how to tell one, but I didn't know how I knew how to tell one. Years later, you know, if you dissect comedy, it gets boring, but I can tell you now how to structure a joke, you know. Mm-hmm. But I'm sitting around with Tim. We'd only been in business about 1 year, and we're working an all-black club called the 20 Grand in Detroit. Motown was in Detroit in those days. They would break their act in at the 20 Grand before they went on the road to Vegas. Anyhow, I'm sitting around with Tim. We're going to write material. And in the middle of it all, I said, Tim, I got an idea. If a white guy starts heckling you, because this would happen to us sometimes in the clubs, every black guy heckle me. I said, if a white guy starts heckling you, I said, I'll stop and I'll say, hold it, buddy. Leave him alone. Yeah. He's mine. You know, go get your own. Yeah. After all, you know how hard they are to train. Now, Tim says...
You can't not laugh.
Tim said to me, oh, Tom, that's kind of racist. I said, I didn't, no, Tom, no. We're writing material. Don't stop the flow. We got to keep the flow. Mm-hmm. But I think that's kind of racist. I said, well, you know, he said, Tom, you don't have to explain to me you're not a racist, but it's kind of sensitive. I said, okay. Now, that night, I swear to God, the second show, there was 22 black guys there celebrating one of the guys' birthday. The moment we hit the stage, the black guy in the back said, hey, white boy, what the hell are you doing in this neighborhood? And Tim jumped up. He said, hold it, brother. Leave him alone. He's mine. Go get your own. After all, you know how hard they are to train. And the brothers were pounding the table.
They loved it.
They
Yeah.
were pounding the table. They were laughing. They stood and cheered them. I said, how come it wasn't so funny when I said, context.
So did you ever use that when you were the guy who said it?
No, we didn't use it for that time.
Oh, God.
We had so many great moments.
Now, you mentioned, since we're kind of teaching, it's interesting that there's a plan on how to structure a joke. And, stand up, like, I don't know this world really. I know how to do jokes for movies.
Yeah.
But how do you, what's the trick?
If you dissect comedy, it gets boring. But by and large,
this whole podcast is boring, so you'll be fine. Yeah.
I always say if you dissect comedy, it gets boring. But there's a formula to writing a joke. First of all, comedy is 9/10 surprise. The audience laughs because they didn't think you were going to say that. Right. So the setup line has to hide the punchline. The other rule is there are no victimless jokes. Who's the victim in a joke? Me, you, society, the government, the airlines, Rodney Dangerfield, he was the victim. I get no respect. Somebody's going to be wrong in this joke, and so that's once you realize that, you'll realize why a joke sometimes doesn't work. Because either you gave it away, they saw the punchline coming, or there wasn't a clear enough victim in the joke.
In movie scripts, we try to do the least amount of setup. You have to do the setup, but you can't over set up something.
Yeah, because you'd give away.
Right, yeah, or
they'd see it coming.
It's just too long, yeah.
Both my parents were alcoholic at one time and all that. So anyhow, when I was aboard ship, I started reading a lot of books on the powers of the mind. Anyhow, when I talk to comedy classes, I call it the joy of stand-up comedy and how to get there. And I motivate them that if you have the gift to make people laugh, this is a rare, rare gift. Less than 1% of the population of the world make a living at what they love to do. If you can get up in front of an audience and you're a lawyer, a director, you're a doctor, and if you can talk to an audience for an hour on any subject, you're in less than 1% of the population of the world. If you can get up in front of an audience and make them laugh for an hour, you're in less than 1/1,000,000th of 1%. That's what I tell the comedians. You know how special you are? You bring laughter and healing to the world. Laughter is healing. That's not a theory anymore. Laughter is healing because of a man named Norman Cousins, and I could get into that. But
yeah, I have read something about that, yeah.
Here's what I say about laughter. When you're on stage, say there's a pond right here, and you throw a rock as high as you can in the air, and it goes up in the air, and it comes all the way down, and it hits the pond, and it splashes across the pond. If that were laughter, when you throw, you don't move on your next line when that laugh is on its way up. Some nights, and I don't know till I get out there, the audience, I feel my timing off of the audience. Some nights, it goes up here and it starts here, and I'll move on that line. I'll move on my next line there. And some nights it'll be here, some nights it'll be here. Some nights I let it hit the pond, and some nights I let it hit the pond and spread all the way across. I can't tell you, the audience, by the time I start reading the audience, sometimes a joke that usually gets a huge laugh got a short laugh. So it was on its way down and I move on the next line, till I get the audience caught up in my rhythm.
Yeah, that rhythm and the timing is so important. And, I'm just I'm a civilian when it comes to stand-up comedy, but I do my critique of a lot of stand-up comics is they wait too long for the laugh to die down, where you should go to the next thing. It's like Bob Hope he didn't wait for the laugh. He always said, but I want to tell you, he ignored.
But seriously, folks.
Yeah, but seriously, folks, that's the whole thing.
Well, I can teach you a lot of things about stand-up comedy.
So are you saying the timing is almost like as you're describing it, I'm seeing it almost like a dance where, I did ballroom dancing for a long time. I taught ballroom dancing, and in ballroom dancing, you have the male energy and the female energy, but then the way you dance changes based on how responsive your partner is, and how well your partner can kind of read your lead. Is that sort of like what you're seeing is you feel into that partner and the partner is the audience?
Yeah, of course. I'm only as good as the audience is.
And every audience is different. That's what we found when we did our live show, the Kentucky Fried Theater. Yeah.
I remember years ago working Mr. Kelly's in Chicago, and it was opening night. The comedy team had split up. Now I was appearing in a club where Tim Reid and I had appeared, and the critics had given us rave reviews at that club. Now I'm doing it alone, and I'm thinking, I'm afraid they're going to say Tom without Tim is in a very strong act. And I'm waiting to go on. I'm just real nervous about all that kind of stuff, But when I went out there, just before I went out, there was an old black man in the kitchen named Cleveland, and we called him Cleve, And every night he knew well enough not to talk to the entertainers just before they went on, because they're usually going through nervous stuff. And so I was getting ready to go on. He had gone to the John, and he had come back, and he was over in the corner, and they were starting to introduce me. I said, "Hey." He said, "What? What you want, boy?" We used to talk like that all the time. "What you want, boy?" I said, "Did you wash your hands?" He said, "No." Why? I said, "What for?" I said, "Now they're starting to introduce me." I said, "In my neighborhood, after you finish peeing, they teach you to wash your hands." He said, "Well, in my neighborhood, they teach you not to pee on your hands." And I started laughing, and I went on stage laughing. I had this grin on my face, and it taught me something. I was laughing, and the audience saw me, and they were laughing at me, and I hadn't said a word yet.
Yeah.
So I would tell new comedians, walk on stage with a big smile on your face.
I get interviewed a lot, as you do. You do interviews. And what I learned from watching Harold Ramis be interviewed is that they would ask him questions, and he would always smile through the whole interview.
Yeah.
And that somehow, and I would talk about this with Jim Abrams, and he said, "Yeah, that's what we should do. We should always just smile."
There's so many little tricks you learn the hard way. That paying dues as a stand-up comedian, it's just hard to describe. I had a wife and 3 kids. She didn't marry a comedian. She married a guy just out of the service working construction. Her dad worked in a factory for 40 years, never missed a paycheck. Every Friday there was a paycheck he never took a day off. Every Friday there was a paycheck in the bank, and they had food on the table and a roof over their head, And here I was this stable guy doing construction and everything. And one day I'm going to go into show business. Show business where I lived at, they're going, "Are you crazy? What are you talking
stable.
about?"
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also with a black guy in 1969, you're going to tour the North and the South where they had the Jim Crow laws in the South. And again, on the 4th time on stage, the guy put a lit cigarette out in Tim's face. We had there were people that wanted to resist us, a game they called divide and conquer. That if you're getting along, there's people that they thrive in many ways if we don't get along. As long as we don't get along.
Well, it validates their own worldview.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to ask you, can anyone be funny? Because you started out as a civilian.
When I was a little boy, I had 8 brothers and sisters. We lived in this shack, a rat-infested, roach-infested shack. If you had holes in your shoes, you put a cardboard in it. If a window broke, you stuck a rag in it. It was cold there all the time. It was in Chicago, But I shined shoes in taverns. I set pins in bowling alleys. I caddied in the summertime. I sold newspapers on the corner, all to help feed my brothers and sisters. And none of this do I regret. I would go, there were 8 taverns. There were 36 taverns in Harvey, Illinois, where I grew up on the South Side. There were 8 in my neighborhood. I would go to all the taverns in the neighborhood because there was factories and steel mills all around where when the men got off work, they'd come into the bars, So now I'd take the second trip around. I would always go to my uncle, my mom's brother-in-law owned a tavern, and my mom was a bartender there. I would go to that tavern last and wait for the shifts to change because my mom was there, but also my uncle told jokes behind the bar. And it fascinated me. I was a little boy. I was 9, 10 years old. He would tell, with his vocabulary, his vernacular, he would hit this punchline that would fill the room, this sound, laughter would fill the room like electricity and unite everybody. Wow. And I thought, that's amazing that he could do that. And I would emulate him. Many of his jokes should not be told on a Catholic school playground, but I did. But so I got in the habit of where I liked to tell a joke, but I didn't ever think I'd ever be a comedian, But the first time we went on stage, Tim Reid and I went on stage, it was really the second time because the first night we finally, there weren't any comedy clubs in America when we started out. None. Yeah. No comedy clubs. So we worked what they call the Chitlin Circuit, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs in the North and the South. The 20 Grand in Detroit, the High Chaparral in Chicago, the Burning Spear, the Guys and Gals Lounge, the Club Harlem, all these, Cotton Club. We worked all these black clubs. We went to a jazz club and asked the owner, could because there weren't any place for us to break in material. And by the way, in those days, you had to write a 20-minute act. If you were going to, you didn't, like today, you can write 3 minutes and go on open mic night and try it out.
Yeah.
But you had to have at least 20 minutes of material if you were going to be an opening act. We went on stage that first night, and we were so scared. We were in the kitchen and dumping garbage and all that. We're gagging, and we had never been on stage before. And we're pacing, and anyhow, the guy said, he opened the kitchen door. He said, "What do I call you guys?" We said, Dreesen and Reid. He said, Dresden and Reid. I said, no, Tim and Tom, or Tom and Tim. I said, just say Tim and Tom. So now he introduced us. We went up on stage, and we went so fast. All we wanted to do was remember our lines.
And get out of there.
We're the kind of Tim and Tom. He's Tim, I'm Tom. We just roll away. Pretty soon. And we had like 20 minutes of material. We were like in 8 minutes, we were off the stage. We got the guy in the corner. We said, how do we do? Did we do okay? He said, I don't know how you did. You never gave me a chance to laugh. He said, come back tomorrow and slow.
Everybody's got to start somewhere.
He said, come back tomorrow and slow down. So we went back the next night, but something I had written that night, right from the beginning, got a big laugh. And when it did, it was almost like one of those B movies you see where the dark clouds open up and the sun bursts through. Yeah. My whole being went, oh, yeah, this is what I want to do.
It works.
I want to be a stand-up comedian. Well, it was a Friday night. I couldn't sleep that whole night. I had a wife and 3 kids. I couldn't sleep. I got up in the morning. I walked to the church that I was an altar boy. And when I was a kid, I was an altar boy. And where I sang in the choir, and my mom sang in the choir when she was a little girl. And there was no one in church. It was a Saturday morning. I got on my knees. I prayed. I said, God, now I know. I want to be a stand-up comedian. If you let me make my living as a stand-up comedian, I'll do charity work. I was making all these promises. Today, I'd like to put an addendum to some of those promises. but nonetheless, I knew that moment that I was never going to let anything get in my way of being a stand-up comedian. My wife left me 3 times. She took the kids. I mean, it crushed me. Over times, it crushed me because, and we're closer than ever. But my ex-wife passed away. What was her name? Oh yeah, Plana. She gave me a wealth of material. And we got divorced, and she'd come to the club sometimes, where I'd be working at, and she'd laugh. But
I thought you were going to say to heckle me. Yeah.
But I mean, it was devastating, the dues I had to pay, and Tim had to pay the same thing, but had to be without my children. But I knew this is what I was put on the planet to do. I just knew that, and I wasn't going to let anything get in my way. I came out here, the comedy team split up. I came out here and I hitchhiked up and down Sunset Boulevard. A girl that I'd gotten a job one time at Mr. Kelly's in Chicago, a girl singer, said, you can do me a favor, house sit. I never knew what house sitting meant. In Chicago, if you're sitting on a house, you're burglarizing it.
That's right. Yeah.
So I stayed there like 3 weeks. I'm thinking I'll be out here for 3 weeks. I told my wife, and I'll come back home. She thought I was going to get a legitimate job now. And I would hitchhike to Comedy Store every night, begging to work for free every night, and hitchhiking back and forth. And finally, she came home with her boyfriend, and he's very jealous. She didn't tell him I was staying there, so that turned into a whole ugly scene too.
Was this pre-Comedy Store?
No, that was Comedy Store.
Okay, by that time, the comedy clubs had opened. In 1975,
wherever you went in America,
people
say, what do you do for a living? You say, I'm a stand-up comedian. Then their next question out of their mouth was, oh yeah? You ever been on Johnny Carson? Yeah. And if you had been on Johnny Carson, in the eyes of America, you weren't a comedian. You might want to be one, going to be one, but you aren't now.
Tell me the first time you were on Carson, how nervous was that?
Oh my,
I can't even imagine.
I'm usually a calm performer because I read all the books on the powers of the mind and all that stuff. But 28 million people watched that show. Freddie Prinze did one appearance on The Tonight Show. He got a sitcom the next day. That's how powerful that show was. All the talent coordinators from all the shows would watch that show. All the buyers from Las Vegas would watch that show. Corporate people, they were looking for the new bright young comedians. And by the way, you couldn't say go to hell. You couldn't say damn. There wasn't cable television in those days. So television was this big.
Yeah.
You had to write material that could make grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and the kids laugh. Well, I finally got Craig Tennis, the talent coordinator from The Tonight Show, to come and see me through a lot of fun stuff I did. But, I got the Tonight Show. He said, okay, you're on next Tuesday. You know, he came to see me at the Comedy Store. I auditioned with a guy named, a comedy team called Baum and Esten, and a new kid named Billy Crystal, and I don't know whatever happened to him. Billy.
Yeah, I don't know. I never heard him.
But
Baum and Esten, I knew those guys.
Billy and I got the shot, you know. So yeah, I go on the following Tuesday. They put you in makeup. We told the whole world I'm going on. Everybody back home. They take me up to my dressing room. They bring me back down to the green room, and they come in. They said, "We ran out of time. I'm sorry. We have to bump you." I go back a week later in makeup, up dressing room, back down the green room. We ran out of time 3 times in a row.
But the great thing is you still get paid.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But the 4th time, and meanwhile, you got a hole in your stomach about this big. Wow. But the 4th time I go to the Fred Dakota, the producer, came in the green room. I came in the makeup room. He said, I got bad news for you. I said, what? He said, you're going on tonight. Now you got a lump in your throat.
Now it's just,
yeah. Now, I'm behind. They come and get me. And now, after I became a veteran on the Tonight Show, all the stage-hands, hey, Dreesen, how's your Cubs doing? Hey, Tommy, good. You know, but your first time, you're walking back that long walk to go, and they're whispering, it's his first time. It's his first time. Because this could be. Now I'm behind that curtain, and Doc Severinson's playing music because they're in commercial break, and the nerves. And the coordinator, Craig Tender, said, are you okay? I said, I'm fine. He walks away. I'm saying, what's my first joke? And I'm going, and I'm saying, oh God, don't abandon me now. I gotta, you know. Anyhow, they open that curtain, you walk out there, and bright lights hit you in the face. You can't see the audience. And there's a spot that they mark on the floor with tape. Yeah. You hit that spot, and I hit that spot, and I did my first joke, it got a laugh. I did my second joke, it got a laugh. I did my third joke, it got a laugh. And I heard Johnny and Ed McMahon laughing behind me.
Wow. Oh, really? You could hear them.
I could hear them. And now I got 8 applause. I do a joke, I got 8 applause, and now I was done. I killed, and I said to the audience, you've been a wonderful audience, and show business is a tough life. So if you like me, just if you like me, and you're Protestant, say a prayer. If you're Catholic, light a candle. If you're Jewish, somebody in your family owns a nightclub. Tell them about me.
That is great. And that's a great last gag. Yeah.
And Johnny, I went back to the curtain. Johnny called me back out to take a second bow.
Wow.
And I never stopped working from that day on. I've never stopped working.
He appreciated comics who always came with new material, too.
Oh, yeah.
And
by the way,
did you have new material every time?
Oh, yeah. He didn't want 2 guys going to bar jokes.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't want that. Yeah. He wanted original monologues, you know. And again, you couldn't swear. You couldn't. And then later, cable television came along, and you could, you know, there were women doing material that Red Fox would have walked out on.
But you told me that he never wanted to talk to the guests before you went out.
Because he thought the dynamic, you know, that he hadn't seen you for a while. And that, so when you sat down, it's like there's a little energy there. Yeah. Now, if you talked in the green room or the dressing room for 20 minutes, that energy's gone. You know, he was very smart that way.
So would you say you were on like every couple of months, or what was the frequency?
1 year I did 7 in 1 year, but you do it like every 3 or 4 months because you had to keep coming up with new, fresh material, which was the hardest part. You know,
and you did not guest host for Carson, but you did guest host for Letterman.
Yeah. Although one time I was on and Bert Convy was a guest host, and he had to use the John. He went and Fred Dakota said, get behind the desk, introduce the next guest. And I got behind, and he held Bert up, and it was a girl singer. Yeah. And I introduced the girl singer, and he said, don't act like you've been here all night long. And so I said, we're back now. And, you know,
who the hell is this?
You know, people at home.
Bert has died, and I want to introduce the next guest.
He had a quick little heart attack.
We actually knew Bert Convy because he came to see our Kentucky Fried Theater show, and then had us on to the. You know, it was our second time on the Tonight Show. He was nice.
A guy named Bob Uecker. I don't know if you knew who he was. He was an announcer.
Yeah. Milwaukee.
Baseball announcer, but he had a sitcom. Bob Uecker had a deadpan face. He would tell the funniest thing, but he would have no reaction to it at all. He would, like Johnny Carson said, you know, you played for a lot of teams. He said, 17. He said, 17 teams in your career in baseball? He said, yeah. He said, I just had one hat, Johnny. It said San Francisco, and then you would flip it, and it would say Chicago Cubs, and you'd flip it. You know, and he'd keep a deadpan face. And every year, when they had the guys going into the Hall of Fame, he would be on because they didn't take him. I mean, he was just a funny, deadpan guy. Well, I'm sitting, what Uecker would do, he would sit next to me, because him and I were friends, but when I'm there, he'd go like, and it would make me laugh. He would do that to get, now, meanwhile, if I said something to Uecker, Fred DeCorda was sitting over there, he said, "You're upstaging the guest. You're upstaging the guest. Once you did your stand-up and sat down and talked to Johnny, you moved down the couch and shut up, because it's now his turn or her turn or whatever it is." Finally, after about 4 or 5 times of this guy making me laugh and getting me in trouble, I kept telling him, "I need this show. You don't need this show. You got a sitcom." So anyhow, one night, Johnny Carson's introducing a guy who wrote a book called Too Dangerous to Be at Large. His name was Ray Johnson or something. He had spent 25 years in prison, and he escaped from maximum security Folsom Prison, the only man ever to escape. And now he was out of prison, and he was like a security advisor to all the McDonald's stores. So he wrote a book, because the last judge that he faced when he sent him to Folsom, he said, "You're too dangerous to be at large." And so that was the title of his book. So Johnny's saying, "Our next guest," and he's going like, and Uecker's sitting next to me. He said, "Our next guest is a man who blah, 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 25 years in prison, 5 years in solitary confinement, by the way. 5 years in solitary confinement."
Is that true?
Yeah, the only year ever to escape, the only man ever to escape from Folsom Prison. "Would you welcome, please, Ray Johnson." I stand up like this to greet him, and Uecker whispered in my ear, "Did you leave your wallet in the dressing room?" And I lost it. I lost it. I laughed so hard in this guy's face when I was shaking that he was getting angry, you know.
Yeah.
And now I'm sitting there, what a funny line. And I'm sitting there, and DeCorda was going like this. And
Again, you're getting balled out.
I know. And the convict turned around and he said, "Hey, pal, you got a problem or something?"
Oh,
you know,
God,
geez.
You know, I read recently that Johnny Carson, at first, he didn't believe that Uecker was really a baseball player. Somebody had to explain to him this guy really was in Major League Baseball on 2 or 3 different teams. And because Carson couldn't believe it, because the guy was so funny.
He had such a dry sense of humor.
Wow.
And by the way, him and Drysdale later became announcers. And with Lifetime, he was 2 for 3 with Drysdale. And he would bring it up every time. He said, "Oh, by the way, you remember when I hit it?" "Oh, yeah, I remember when you hit it."
Yeah.
Incredible time for stand-up comedians, because that Tonight Show launched so many great comedians, because it was something about if Johnny approved of you.
Yeah.
And I was doing Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, Dinosaur, Midnight Special, Rock Concert, Soul Train, American Bandstand. I'm the only white comedian ever to do Soul Train.
Wow.
You know, I was doing all these other shows, $20,000 Pyramid. I mean, you know, I was just working all the time. And I spent so many years not working a lot that when you start working a lot, you don't turn anything down. I was like manic. One time I was on an airplane going east, and I looked out the window and I saw myself on a plane going west.
Yeah.
I said, "I think I'm working too hard."
It's like, you remember Michael Caine used to be in like 7 movies a year, and Carson said to him once, "You know, you can turn stuff down."
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But when you spent that lifetime in comedy, it's such a wonderful, wonderful profession. I tell comedians all the time, I never, ever would talk bad about another comedian. I never saw, I sound like Will Rogers, I never saw a comedian I didn't like, but on stage. Now, I might not like them off stage, and they may not like me, but if you got the courage to get up there, the chutzpah, to try to make people laugh, a group of strangers night after night, you got my heart, you know.
How do you deal with like bombing? Because I think that's one of the biggest fears and also one of the most discouraging experiences, where you have a moment where you get a big laugh and you're like, "I want to do this." And then the next time you go on, you might completely bomb. And
You're assuming that this guy completely bombed.
I mean, I'm sure he has. He's had a successful career.
I was on a Phil Donahue show one time with 5 other comedians, and at the end they had women asking you questions. A woman stood up and she said, "Have you guys ever bombed?" I said, "Ma'am, we trained in bombing." I trained in bombing.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about it. You know, it starts out, you'll go up on stage, you're brand new now, and you'll do a mediocre, you're not very good, and next time you go up, you got a couple of laughs, and now you're a little encouraged. The next time you go up, the same stuff didn't work. First of all, usually working in the new, when you're that new, you're working in front of other comedians who are wanting to get up there, and they're not going to laugh too loud at your stuff. And so so it's trial and error. Pretty soon you'll do 2 shows in a row that went real good, and you're getting confident. Then you'll have a bomb. Then you'll do a couple more, and you'll have a bomb. Then you'll do 3, 4 shows in a row, and then you have a bomb. Then pretty soon you do it. See, in any profession, when you start getting consistent, in sports or when you start getting consistent, is when you're starting to move into that era. And so after a while, you might do 10 shows in a row. Now you know this stuff works. See, there's certain lines I'll do on a night. If I walk into the Laugh Factory or the Comedy Store or the Flappers out in Burbank or the Comedy Chateau, I'll just walk in. Sometimes they'll let me get up and do a few minutes. There's certain jokes I know that if the crowd isn't hot, I'll do that joke that always worked. Know that it isn't me, it's them. Al Jolson used to say there's no such thing as a bad audience, just a bad performer. And I'm telling Al Jolson, you're full of it. Yeah. I met a lot of bad audiences.
Right, there are, yeah.
So what I'm hearing is you just have to get back on that stage.
Yes. Guys say they flipped their motorcycle. You got to get back up on that motorcycle, Yeah. Thing is, it's the endurance. If you really want it that bad, that's part of it. Is the bombing and the not giving up and the believing in yourself and believing you can do this, It's a very, very difficult profession, but it's the greatest profession on the planet. And I'll explain that why, because we started to talk about it earlier. That laughter, for years, we've always heard laughter is healing, because laughter is a psychological deterrent. Right. If you're laughing at a comedian or laughing at somebody on stage or a sitcom, you're not thinking of your problems. So laughter is a psychological deterrent. Now, because of Norman Cousins was the author of he was editor of a magazine called The Saturday Review. He was told that he had a terminal illness, that he had a heart condition, that he wasn't going to live very much longer. The doctors told him that he didn't have long to live. He said because of stress in your body created this heart ailment. He laid in the hospital and he thought, well, if stress made me ill, then positive input would make me well. So he checked out of the hospital. He'd only watch I Love Lucy reruns, Candid Camera, Three Stooges, Marx Brothers. He wouldn't watch evening news. He would not watch, read the newspaper. He lived 27 years after the doctors told him he was going to die. Wow. Because of him, he wrote a book called The Anatomy of an Illness, or a couple books he wrote. So now what we realize is because of Norman Cousins, UCLA did research. What happens to the human body when you laugh? And when you laugh so hard, you laugh so hardly, and tears run down your eyes. And this sense of well-being comes over you. It's because your body's gone through an actual chemical change. So laughter is not only psychologically a deterrent, it's physiologically therapeutic. So comedians are physicians of the soul. And you can call me Dr. Dreesen if you'd like.
Yes, I always have. Yes.
I like it. Comedians are physicians of the soul. I love that sentence.
That's it almost sounds like you said the physicians of the stool. I said no, physicians.
No, it's the soul. Yeah, let's get this started.
But you're right. That's why I tell them, don't tarnish this career. Don't if you're good at it, don't give up on it, because you're very, very important. If you make one person laugh, or you make 100 people laugh,
Did you ever write movies or TV shows? Did you want to?
He's not that good to write movies. I mean, yeah, you're fine with the stand-up thing.
Right. But, David's right. But I wrote treatments for Tim and Tom, for being America's first black and white comedy team. I've written ideas and for a lot of different things. Some of my stuff was stolen,
And wait a minute, let me just say, his book is great, and I read it. Show the book. Yeah.
Everybody can purchase this book.
It's so good. I devoured it, and yeah.
It's on Amazon, and it's got over 500 5-star reviews now.
Yeah.
It's called Still Standing, because I'm at my age, I'm still doing stand-up.
Yeah.
And
97. Can you believe that? You look good. Yeah.
So it's a double entendre. I'm still standing, and I'm a stand-up comedian. But then I said, my journey from streets and saloons to the stage and Sinatra, and it talks about this, what we've been talking about, and a lot of other things that,
I am a frustrated stand-up comedian, but I do a lot of screenings of Airplane and Naked Gun, whatever, and there's always a Q&A after, and I really enjoy doing that. So I kind of have that experience of, but I have if somebody asks me a question, I can talk for 10 minutes. So and I can be funny, and some of the jokes are are canned, but
there's no doubt to what I'm about to tell you, that why there were always more Jewish comedians than there were Gentile comedians, because they were taught. I caddied at an all-Jewish country club when I was growing up. It was an all-Jewish club. In fact, it was not only all-Jewish, it had to be German Jew. It was all German Jews. Years went by and they ran out of German Jews, so they let, Polish Jews and Irish Jews or whatever. But they would, I remember members would say, hey, there's my little nephew, Sidney. He's 11 years old. Wait till I tell you what he said. Sidney, come here. Sidney, tell him what you said last night again. They encouraged comedy. Yeah. I came from a Catholic background. My mother's favorite saying was, children are to be seen and not heard. Yeah. And so, and nuns didn't reward you for ad libs,
My dad never was able to tell a joke, but he said very funny things with a straight face. Yeah. And I think Jerry and I grew up with that, and that kind of became Leslie Nielsen.
No question about it. Yeah. If you have laughter in the home, that's one of the greatest things ever happened to you, to have laughter in the home.
Yeah. David does this. Like, his son will say something really funny, and then everyone in the family, like, we talk about it for like a week.
Charles has kind of grown up with this atmosphere, and he's become fun. He says some really funny things.
Because you can encourage that.
Yeah, I have encouraged that.
You can teach your children a sense of humor. A sense of humor, by my humble definition, is not when you have the ability to laugh at others' shortcomings and misfortunes, when you have the ability to laugh at your own. That's the greatest gift that God can bestow upon a human being. Laugh at yourself.
And it's self-deprecating humor. Yeah. I think I grew up with that.
And what does that show your children? It shows your children, like, you're the parent. You're the children, and you think your parents are gods. You can't live in this universe without these gods. Yeah. And then they come home and tell you, wait till I tell you what happened at the store. Your mother said, I'm reaching for a can of peas. I fell down. My dress went over my head. The peas all landed on fire. And she laughs, and they laugh with her. That teaches them it's okay to do dumb things, because we say dumb things and we do dumb things. Laughing at yourself is so healing.
They're not conscious that they're teaching, but they are.
Yeah.
And what you do in front of your kids sets an example.
An old vaudevillian, when I first started out, that was 55 years ago, an old man about 90 years old came into this little comedy room that I started in Chicago called A Pub. And afterward, he just wanted to talk to me. And he said, remember, the first two jokes are on you. When you walk on stage, do something about some dumb thing you did on the way over here or something like that. He said, it endears you to the audience. They say, he's just like me. He makes mistakes. Because sometimes they see a guy up there in a suit and a tie, or a woman in lovely dress, and say, what has she got to complain about? Or what, good-looking woman on stage. But you show them, no, I'm just like you. I do dumb things, And it really endears you to the audience.
When you think of something, do you immediately write it down? You keep a notebook?
Yeah. For years, I carried. Now today we got the cell phone, so you don't.
Right.
Have to, For years, I always had 3x5 cards and a pen. Because I'd be on an airplane, and I'd be talking to you. I don't know who you are. We just start talking. You'd say something. I go, ooh. Not that what you said is funny, but I can make that funny.
Yes, you can. Yeah.
I always had a skill when I was a kid that people would come in the bar or something and they'd tell a story, and it was just a nice story about, hey, here what David did the other day, and blah blah. And I'd say, you know how that could have been funny? If David would have said this instead of that. Yeah. I could always reconstruct a story.
If you were to summarize it, if somebody's like looking for this career path in their life, what are maybe the top 3 things you would want them to focus on?
I'd say number 1, start where you are. No matter where you want to be a comedian. If you're in Toledo, Ohio, you start in Toledo, Ohio. You get up on, and number 2, work as often as you can. Work as often, get up on stages every time, volunteer for charities. If they don't want to stand up, could you MC it and maybe do a joke or two while you're MCing? But volunteer to get on stage as much as possible, because stage presence it comes from doing it again and again. Maybe number 3, read the book, The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol. If you don't believe in yourself, then how do you expect an audience to believe in you? Wow. Read one of those kind of books. 4, this is important. Realize no one is ever going to help you. It's up to you. If it is to be, it's up to me. I have that on my desk even today. If it is to be, it's up to me. They will help you when you can make money for them. But in the beginning, if you think they're going to drive through to Des Moines, Iowa, and some big producer is going to say, oh, hey, I'm taking you to Hollywood with me, that's not going to happen. And number 5, don't ever quit. Bertrand Russell once said, there are people in show business who become major stars simply because they didn't have sense enough to quit when they should have. Wow. And that's my story, and that's a lot of others.
And that's why I do say that I never give up.
Never,
I'm still trying. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really that's what I would say to them. And study the masters. If you were going to become a brain surgeon, you wouldn't just go operate on brain. You'd go watch the brain surgeons operate. You would study brain surgery, but you would go watch them operate. If there's comedians on a stage that you'd like to be on one day when you're brand new, go to that club and watch. How did they go from there to there? How did they not take their material, but that was a great segue. He went from this subject to that subject, or she did this. It's sort of give you an idea what kind of comedian you'd like to be.
How do you remember everything? If I had to tell jokes, does one joke lead into another?
Well,
naturally.
Whenever somebody asks me that question, I say, "How do you remember everything?" I said, "Because my life depends on it."
Yeah, just because you're scared
you throw me in the water, I gotta swim.
Yeah,
yeah. And what I learned through the years, there's a lot of books on memory. There's a guy named Jerry Lucas who played in the NBA. He's one of the great Hall of Famers. He wrote a memory book with a guy named Harry Lorraine. It's called The Memory Book. But he has a system called the link system, where you link things, one sentence to another. And it'll really help you out when you're out there under pressure.
Have you ever had an experience where your mind just went completely blank?
Yeah. An old comedy writer named Maury Amsterdam, he was on the Dick Van Dyke show.
Yeah, I remember it. Yeah.
Maury, he once gave me some great advice. He said, if you're ever out there, he claimed that in the John Kennedy, Richard Nixon debates, it was the first time they debated on TV,
right, that
he helped Kennedy become president, and Kennedy sent him a letter thanking him, because he said, whenever they throw a question at you and you don't have it, what are you going to do about Iraq or something?
Yeah.
He said, if you don't have an answer, say, that's a very good question, Mr. Chairman. And let me say this about that. That's giving your brain a chance to catch up.
Yeah.
So if I went blank, and this happened to me a couple of times, one night, and I still remember, because what happens is you put these pieces of material together and you're bringing them on there because they got laughs. But one night, something that always got laughs, it blanked. The audience didn't do anything. In my brain, see, while you're laughing, I'm catching up to my next joke. But there was no laughter. And all of a sudden, I'm going, anyhow, it's just always great being here on the Tonight Show. Marijuana,
Did that actually happen to you?
Yeah. Because the next joke was about marijuana. But I started talking and my brain caught up. But for a moment, I was hung out to dry, Just keep talking and your brain will catch up,
Well, eventually. Has it happened to you where you go completely blank?
Oh, yeah. No, that's, yeah.
Yeah. How do you handle it?
I run off stage. Yes.
And change your underwear.
And change your underwear. Yeah. I can't remember what I've done, but just sometimes it happens.
It's the highest of highs and the lowest of lows.
I mean, all of show business. Yes. Yeah.
I remember opening for Frank Sinatra in front of 40,000 people in Hawaii. 40,000 people, outdoor screens and everything. Most of the time it was 20,000 people in arenas. And when you get them, when you got them in the palm of your hand and they're roaring with you, they're caught up in my rhythm. I can't even describe you that high. Wow. That because you walk off stage, you're on cloud nine. And then Frank would say, Tommy Dreesen, come back and take another bow. Tommy, come back and take him. Wasn't he funny? This is my man, or something like that.
He said, I want you to go out there. We're in the round. I want you to stand in the middle of 20,000 people. And I want you to hold their attention for 40 minutes. No props, no tricks, no charts, no special arrangement, no special lighting, no orchestra, nothing. Just you and 20,000 people. And his road manager looked at me and said, one more thing, Tom, not one of them came to see you.
I didn't need cocaine or alcohol. I mean, I was high the rest of the night, It's hard to describe how to go from that kid who was scared to death his first time on stage to opening from Frank Sinatra in front of 20,000 people. I don't mean that as bragging. I'm just saying the reward is great if you can stick it out.
And also it's possible. It's possible to grow up the way you did and make it at the highest level of comedy.
I always said I never cared if CBS, ABC, NBC, CBS really liked me. When I in my neighborhood, when I was shining shoes and everything, said, played a word game with me. Say you said love, I'd say mom. You'd say baseball, I'd say Cubs. You'd say show business, I'd say Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr. Even as a little boy, to me that was what. So these guys, the epitome of show business, and they loved one another. They had friendship one another, and they loved show business. They loved performing for you. You know that if they thought enough of me to put my name on the marquee with them and come on the same stage with them, I was like a pig in slop. You could close the lid on me. I've got tapes of Frank calling me back out to take another bow because it's that little boy, shining shoes in the bar, and Sinatra's on the jukebox. Yeah. And then years later, I'm a bartender, and they're going, come fly with me, let's fly. And years later, I'm flying with him in his private jet. And he's talking to me and he doesn't know I'm about ready to pee my pants.
How did you meet Frank Sinatra?
And I was touring with Smokey, and we were working at Caesars in Lake Tahoe, and Frank Sinatra was appearing at Harrah's next door in Lake Tahoe. And I had worked Harrah's many times with Sammy Davis and with Mac Davis. And so I had seen Frank Sinatra in big arenas twice. So I had 7 days there. On one of those nights I was going to go over, I didn't know which night. I called the maitre d'. It was like a Wednesday night or something. I said, I think I'll go see Frank tonight after the show. I didn't even change out of my stage clothes. But I had called the maitre d'. He said, don't worry about it, Tom. We'll put you in a nice little corner here. So I rushed over there, and as I'm rushing into the showroom, the vice president of Harrah's Hotel, a man named Holmes Hendrickson, very powerful guy, was talking to a big heavyset guy with a cigar. And he saw me, and he said, Tommy, come here. And I reluctantly went over because Frank Sinatra created more excitement walking to the microphone than most people did with their whole act. When he walked out on stage, the arena, it was unbelievable. The cheers and the cheers and the cheers. He hadn't sung a note yet. So I didn't want to miss that. So when Holmes Hendrickson saw me, he said, Tommy, come here. I said, I reluctantly went over, and he said, Tommy, this is Mickey Rudin. Well, I recognized the name. That was Frank Sinatra's lawyer. Wow. Very powerful guy in our business. He said, Mickey, this is Tom Dreesen. And I think Tom would make a great opening act for Frank Sinatra.
He just came up with that and first you heard of it.
Because I had performed for Holmes for many of his acts. Right. But he said, I think he made a great opening act for Frank Sinatra. And the lawyer got a pained expression on his face, like he heard this a million times.
Thank you.
And he winked at the vice president, but I caught the wink. And he said, hey, kid, if I gave you a week with Frank, would you want more than $50,000? I said, Mr. Rudin, put it this way. If you gave me a week with Frank, would you want more than $50,000? Yeah. He said, I like this kid, because I made him laugh, And a week later, they asked me, would I want to work Atlantic City with Frank Sinatra at the Golden Nugget? And I said, yeah. I figured out, try to get my picture taken with him, hang it in every bar back in Chicago where I used to shine shoes.
Just a picture, yeah.
And anyhow, on the second night, he and his wife Barbara took me out to dinner. And I can remember like it was yesterday. We were eating dinner like this. He was sitting across from me. He set his knife and his fork down. He said to me, I like your material and I like your style. I'd like you to do a few other dates with me if you're interested. And I didn't say, let me check my calendar. I said, yeah. And it turned into 14 years, 45, 50 cities a year, a friendship that I'll always treasure. I stayed in his home 6 times a year. We'd stay up till dawn. He never went to bed till the sun came up. He was nocturnal,
Yeah.
And so we'd ride around the desert till the sun came up.
And he forced you to drink, I imagine.
I used to have to sneak around that because, man, this guy every night with the Jack Daniels,
Yeah.
One night in Las Vegas, we had done one-nighters all over the country, and we were at the Desert Inn. We did 2 shows. And now afterward, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and he's sitting in the back, and I'm sitting with a couple of the other guys, Jilly Rizzo and his buddies, and I'm tired. I'm really tired. He's talking, I get up. I'm going to get up. He said, hey, where are you going? He said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to bed. He said, what for? I said, I got to get up early in the morning, go to the cemetery and visit those guys. He said, what guys? I said, all those guys who died trying to stay up with you every night. He laughed. He said, go to bed. And he made me tell that story.
That's good. You earned going to bed. Yeah.
But the interesting thing, when we got alone in the car some nights, he would come and get me out of my bungalow. He had a beautiful compound down in Rancho Mirage. The outer perimeter was all bungalows named after his songs. New York, New York, Strangers in the Night, Tender Trap, My Way.
Yeah.
And anyhow, and house guests are Gregory Peck and his wife Veronique, Kirk Douglas and his wife Ann, Jack Lemmon and his wife Alicia, Clint Eastwood and whoever he was dating at the time, Robert Wagner, Joe St. John, Angie Dickinson. These are people I saw in the movies in Harvey, Illinois when I'm a little boy. Yeah. And now I'm sitting at the table and they're asking me, how'd you get into stand-up comedy? I want to say, how did you win the Academy Award?
Right, yeah.
But anyhow, but when we would get alone in the car riding around the desert at night, he wasn't the great Frank Sinatra and I wasn't this comedian. He was a kid from the neighborhood and so was I. Yeah. He grew up on the streets and so did I. In fact, a guy from the New York Times one time, we were at Patsy's restaurant in New York. Well, the guy was leaving the restaurant and was just joking. I had met him a couple of times. He stopped and he said to Frank, "Hey, Frank, how come you keep this guy Dreesen with you?" Frank said, "You mean besides the fact that he's funny?" And he said, "Yeah, besides the fact that he's funny." He said, "If I'm a saloon singer, and I am, then Tommy's a saloon comedian. By that, I mean, we're just a couple of neighborhood guys." And I've always treasured that remark because that's who I am. I'm a kid from the neighborhood. I really am. I had always had a problem with the Hollywood elite who did 2 appearances on a sitcom and now want limos picking them up. And all this kind of BS, when you were with Frank and all those stars, they weren't pretentious. They really were more interested in you. They were so comfortable in their stardom, in their skin, so comfortable.
That they never had to put on the acts.
No, exactly.
Yeah, that's so great to hear.
Yeah.
I think you're like that too, David. You're very just a regular guy, who happens to be funny.
And that's I think that's why we're friends. I really believe that.
Yeah.
Because we don't try to put anything on, and
But we're just. I know what he's done. I mean, he didn't have to tell me. I know what he's done. And so we try to make each other laugh. Anyhow, this has been a lot of fun.
This is so great.
This was so much fun. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your stories and also your wisdom.
This is so important in any endeavor. Mm-hmm. At a certain point in your life, when you've accomplished somewhat success, you have to pass it on. Mm-hmm. It wasn't your information in the first place. It was passed on to you. And it's your job to pass it on to others, make their load a little bit lighter and,
Yeah, and that's the entire purpose of this podcast is to pass on information and the knowledge and by people like you.
And I remember when I was in high school, we'd watch the Dick Van Dyke Show. And there was one episode where Dick Van Dyke had to talk to his son's class about what he did. And all the other dads, I guess it was easy for them to say insurance executive or whatever they were. And Dick Van Dyke didn't know how to talk about comedy, but he did. And I remember one of the things he said was, like you said, comedy depends on surprise.
Well, see, there's many different things that a comedy writer does. You laughed there. Did you know why you laughed? Because that was unexpected. You didn't expect me to do that. Did you see that? Unexpected means that something happens that you didn't think would happen. And it's kind of like a surprise, really. And that makes you laugh.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like stuck in my mind that there was more than just craziness. There was a method to it.
Yeah.
And so years later, I happened to be at Kelsey Grammer's house for a party, and Dick Van Dyke was there. So I met Dick Van Dyke, and I told him what an influence that had on me. And I told him about that show. He had no recollection of it.
Okay.
No, yeah.
But you remember the opening of that show, he would always come walking in and trip over the couch.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and he would just do a little sidestep. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. There's so many different approaches to comedy. And you, if you're a brand new comedian listening to this, and this is the world you want to be in, then study them all. Study, as I said earlier, study the masters and decide the kind of comedian you'd like to be. And then go for it. Go for it. And you're going to get rejected. You're going to get turned down. All those things are going to happen to you. But you, as Frank used to sing, I pick myself up and get back in the race because that's life,
Yeah.
And pick up Tom's books.
Yes. Yeah. I hope you enjoy it.
Especially this last one, Still Standing by Tom Dreesen. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Tom, again for coming on this show. And thank you guys for being here in the recording of it and listening. those of you joining when this is released.
All right.
We'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That was fun.
That was